All right, welcome back to Virtual School Assembly for this special teacher professional development session. Today our guest is Amber Harper. Amber's an author, educator, Google certified trainer, a Gurgle certified trainer.
I mean, whatever.
She's a teacher burnout coach whose mission is to activate teachers' self-empowerment and beat burnout to live a happy, fulfilled life. She's the founder of burnedinteacher.com, author of Hacking Teacher Burnout, which is coming really soon, probably by time this, actually, no, probably not after this episode, but soon. It's coming soon. And she's obsessed with helping educators going from burned out to burned in. So we're going to talk about that today, what it means to be burned in. She hosts a weekly podcast dedicated to action, inspiration, and support for teachers, which is how I know about her because I listen to the podcast. And it's called the Burned In Teacher Podcast. So with all that, Amber, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tyler. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Now, so we should start with just this whole idea of burned in, right? And so tell us, what's the difference between being a burned out teacher and a burned in teacher? And where did that start for you, this whole idea of being burned in?
Yeah, great question, Tyler. So burned in teacher was born out of my burnout. And basically to give you kind of the quick and dirty version of how it came to be, I taught for 12 years in the classroom, and from my very first year, I rode that roller coaster of burnout for different reasons, in different seasons of my own life. And I was not satisfied ever, any of those 12 years with just being told to go for a run, take care of yourself, fill your cup. You know, that's all true. We have to take care of ourselves as teachers and put ourselves first. But when I was told to drink more water, eat healthily, go for a run, get more sleep, I did all of those things. And I still didn't feel like I had the steps necessary to truly feel happy and fulfilled with my life. I loved teaching. I loved working with a team. That is the thing that I miss the most now that I'm working with teachers full time, is working with a team of educators. They are the best people in the world. And we're teachers, so we love systems, we love processes, right? We love routines, but there didn't seem to be anything out there for teachers, or for me in particular, to help me to not just beat the burnout, but actually grow through it and decide what it is that I truly wanted. And it wasn't until 2016 when I had left the classroom and actually left the district that I worked at for 7.5 years. I left to work at a nonprofit organization. And long story short, I ended up back in the classroom at another district 6 months later. And again, just was totally burnt out, but for a totally different reason than I was at the other district. It wasn't that I hated teaching. It was just I could not find that purpose. And really, I felt like I had these consistent arguments with myself, like, you're just a teacher. That's all you ever will be. You know, I wanted to be a coach, and I kept being told no in so many different ways. And I just knew that I wanted to serve teachers in some way. And then in spring of 2016, I was invited to go to a Google Summit in Franklin, Indiana, which I'm sure you know all about that, being a former Hoosier yourself. And I went there and went to a session by Jeff Heel, and I was like, I want a badge. Whatever that thing is, I want it. And then I learned that teachers, in fact, not just teachers, but educators could become Google certified educators. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like, I didn't even know that was, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. So I worked my butt off. And I kind of skipped an important step here, but I worked my butt off, went through the Google certification process for level 1, level 2, and then became a trainer. But rewind, in the van on the way home from this conference with other teachers, I'd fallen asleep because, as teachers do, we stay up too late whenever we go to conferences together because we're super fun people. I fell asleep, woke up, and I thought, burned in teacher, because I was 180 degrees a different teacher from when I went to when I left. And I thought, you know, it's the opposite. Burned out, burned in. I'm going to tell my story. I'm going to open this conversation. It's not going to be negative. It's not going to be venting. I want to empower teachers to tell their own story and empower them to believe that they are capable of whatever they want to do. So I bought the domain to burnedinteacher.com the next day, and I started blogging both about my challenges with burnout, but also what was burning me in, which was becoming Google certified and also using these G Suite tools with my students. I had first graders, and I was so lucky to work in a district that had been one-to-one for a very long time. So in addition to Google, they also use Seesaw, which I can't imagine. If I taught high school, I would still use Seesaw. But I just was so lit up, and I still talk about these things and get so passionate and excited about them because I still teach teachers in schools how to use these tools because it's part of my journey. It's part of what I do. It's part of my mission. So it really started out as a blog, and then the longer I did it, then I became a certified trainer, like I said, about a year later. And I started leading Google workshops in my local community. We're so lucky in Indiana to have these education service centers all around the state. And so I was invited to present at these education service centers, and I would be invited to present at schools, but then I started to have to tell people no because I was teaching full-time in the classroom. So it's really just evolved over the years, and now it's a full-blown website, podcast. I have a membership, and I do keynotes. I have this book coming out, and I truly feel that me empowering myself and believing that I was capable of searching and taking steps and finding what I was meant to do, which was share my story of burnout and share, that you can change your life. It doesn't mean for everybody that has to be stepping out of the classroom. I think sometimes, and I've seen this so many times with teachers that I know personally and that I have met virtually or throughout this journey, that we get burned out and we think the only option is to quit. And the burn-in process is really to help you to really, truly analyze and figure out how you got to that point, and gives you actionable steps you can take to truly decide what you want and how you're going to get there.
Yeah. So let's talk about burnout for a minute. Obviously, there are different reasons that teachers burn out. And sadly, the teaching profession, this is such an interesting thing because you don't become a teacher on accident. It's not one of those things that's your backup plan. Like, people become teachers because they're passionate about teaching. They love kids. And so when you become a teacher, you would think that no one would quit the teaching profession, yet it has one of the highest attrition rates of any profession. Almost 50% leave within 5 years. And so we have this huge numbers of people leaving the teaching profession. Why is that? You've done a lot of research on burnout. What are the biggest factors that contribute to teacher burnout and to ultimately leaving the teaching profession?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I kind of want to kind of go back to something that you said about, some people don't accidentally become teachers. There are actually a lot of people that I have talked to that their first profession was not education. And they became a teacher because they wanted to make a difference. And it ends up being their life's calling is to be a teacher. And actually, whenever I started teaching, my husband and I had our daughter very young, right out of high school. And I thought, I never knew what I wanted to do, but I had been a student my whole life, so I can be a teacher, right? I know what they do. And it ended up being my absolute passion, was to educate. And that's what I still do. I'm still an educator. So I think, then going back to your question, Tyler, about why teachers leave, I kind of already touched on the fact that they feel like they have no other option. They believe this, and number two, misery loves company. And unfortunately, you get on social media. I mean, it's just a negative place. If you don't have to look very far to find negativity on social media, but the challenges of educators are glorified through the funny memes and the GIFs. And, the most popular Instagram accounts are the ones that glorify how horrible teaching is. And that is so sad to me. And then the people who, like me and you, who are trying to empower educators and get them excited and help to activate them taking steps to continue this incredibly important profession, are not so popular. I mean, we have followers and we do the work, but it's not as easy to find as the negative stuff. And so that goes back to the fact that your brain looks for what you believe. So if you believe there's no other option than to quit, then your brain will find reasons to help you believe that it's true. And when you feel like you can't open the conversation because it's negative, and when you are surrounded by apathy, and when you try to open that conversation with other teachers and they say, join the club, I've been burned out for years, there's nothing else to do, this is just the way it is. When you consistently hear those messages, you honestly believe that there is no other choice. The other reason I think people leave is because they can't name how they're feeling. Because what I struggled with when I went through burnout several times is I'm just frustrated. I'm anxious. I'm depressed. At one point, I know that I had postpartum depression, but I was so deep in my sadness and frustration, I didn't even take the time to recognize that that's what it could have been. And I think we can touch on this too. How many educators are on anti-anxiety and anti-depression medications? So we become numb to these things, where we really should be, like I've said many times, activation is one of my core values. So instead of activating and looking at burnout as a chance for growth, it's a call for change. That change doesn't have to be you quitting education altogether. It could be a change in grade level. It could be a change in literally a building in your district. Depending on your principal, the culture of different elementary schools in your district can be two different worlds. And I'm telling you, grade level to grade level, my first year teaching, I was with a team that did not support me. They wanted me to sit down and shut up. And obviously you've gotten to know me here in the last 15 minutes. Like, I'm like, let's do this thing. Like, let's change some things if they're not working, and let's do all things. And I was moved to a different grade level, one grade level up. And it was a completely different world for me. These women were my people, and I just had the best time with them. So back to naming what it is that you're challenged with is, through my research, I have identified 3 different types of burnout. So you can be burned and bored, burned and over it, or burned and unbalanced. And you may even be not burned out, but you might just need a slight adjustment. Something's just a little off. And that's those people that are saying something's not right. I'm going to do something about it. I'm looking for answers. That was me, and I just could not find any answers that helped to give me the necessary steps. So I created a quiz, a free quiz for teachers to take that first step, because Dan Siegel says, if you can name it, you can tame it. And this is such an important validation in helping you to believe you're not crazy, you're not a bad person. And there are people, I have goosebumps, there are people out there that want to help you. They want to not only hear your voice, but they want to help you to define and figure out what it is that you're truly challenged with, and help you to take the next best steps to help you get to where you want to be.
Yeah. So let's get into some of those next steps. In your book, Hacking Teacher Burnout, you go through, I think, 8 steps, right?
I do.
Of becoming a burned-in teacher. Obviously, we don't have time today to go through all 8 of those steps, but maybe let's pick 1 or 2 and talk about some things that teachers can be doing to combat this burnout that all of us deal with at some point or another. Every teacher is going to deal with burnout, you know? So what are some of the things we can be doing?
So it's funny. So when I created Burn a Teacher back in 2016, it was not an 8-step process. It was just the fact that it was, the 180 degrees different feeling than being burnt out. But I literally I need to just have it on play so I can just play it really quickly for people. But I was driving to school one day to teach, and I thought, I just read Ditch That Textbook by Matt Miller. I'd read it the summer before, and who is also a fellow Hoosier and super great friend. And Ditch is an acronym. And so I thought, you know what? I wonder if burned in could be an acronym. Could that be a process that I take teachers through? So I have literally on my voice memos, B could be like begin where you are, and U could be understand, and R could be like reflect. Like I would talk through this. So I'll quickly tell you what the letters stand for, and then I'll go through the first 2 steps, because those are things that you can walk away and actually do today. All right. So B stands for begin where you are. U is understand your teacher brand. R is reflect on your challenges. N is nurture your strengths and habits. R, N. E is extend your reach and possibilities. D is determine your long-term goals. I is initiate lasting change. And N is never settle.
Cool.
So that's the 8-step process that I go through in the book, Hacking Teacher Burnout. It's my course, Burned In Teacher University, that my members of Burned In Teacher Tribe go through. It's my core content, and this is what we go through together. No matter what type of burnout you're dealing with, these steps are meant to help you anytime you're met with a challenge or a crisis, such as the pandemic, and teaching virtually, etc. So for begin where you are, this is truly just kind of assessing where you've been that brought you to this place. So this is like, you're looking at a map. Where am I now? How did I get here? Okay, so this is thinking about physically, mentally, emotionally. How long have I been here? Because something that, like I've said, going back to my story, is that I had a lot of things that built up over time that led me to extreme burnout, which turned into depression. And I just didn't take the time to acknowledge them and think about what it is that my next steps would be. So that's really, thinking of your story that brought you to this place of burnout, acknowledging it, respecting it, and naming it. So this is really step one, is taking that burnout quiz, and identifying what type of burnout you're dealing with. This is also thinking about who your people are. Who is it that you serve the most? If I've had principals take this quiz, okay? So their people are their teachers. If you're a teacher, then who are your people? Your students, right? Their families. If you're a teacher coach, if you're an instructional or technology coach, who are your people? So really thinking about who you want to serve the most, okay? It's what are your core values? What are 2 words that you need to come back to anytime you have to make a decision? Because as teachers, we're inclined a lot to say yes without thinking about our time and valuing our own time and our boundaries, etc. So this is really thinking about who am I here to serve? What are my core values? What type of burnout am I dealing with? And what brought me to this place? And there is a lot more in there, but that's just kind of the quick and dirty version of that. So then understand your teacher brand is really thinking about, okay, so your brand is whatever people say it is. It's whatever your people say it is. So if you don't know what a brand is, I mean, think about, let's compare McDonald's and Taco Bell. Okay, which one would you choose and why? That's a brand. And as teachers, we have brands, especially if you have kids of your own, when they come home, which teachers they despise and can't stand, and you even know why, and you know which teachers they love and why they love them. That is a brand that is carried with students or whoever your people are for generations. I mean, my sisters had teachers that I had in school, and they knew which ones to steer clear of, and they knew which ones to look forward to. It is really all about the way that you think, feel, believe, behave. And this is not about keeping up with the Joneses, but it's how you take care of yourself. It's about how you take care of your classroom, how you even take care of your content and how you deliver it. It's about your relationships. It's about what 10 adjectives do I want people to use to describe me versus I do encourage my teachers to do this, send out a Google form or sit down with your principal, sit down with a couple of other teachers and say, I need you guys to be, I'm telling you, be completely honest. If you had 10 words to describe me, what would you use? So it's simply the 10 adjective activity, right? And the other thing is to pay attention. So I go through these steps. It's kind of like it's the 5 senses of really looking, listening. What are people saying? Think about the conversations that you want your students or your people to have about you when you're not around. It's also, and understand your teacher brand. Your brand is also associated with who you hang around with the most. You are, and this is not a new quote, right? You are the average of the 5 people that you hang around with the most. And this is true in your personal life, and it is certainly true in your professional teacher life. So think about who you hang out with at your school the most and why, and listen. What kind of conversations do you hear them having the most? Where do you hang out with them and why? Is it the teacher's lounge? Is it in the hallway? Is it whispering or is it serving and helping each other? So it's really paying attention to those things that are helping you to build up your teacher brand. Because again, like I said earlier, whatever you believe will come through in your thoughts, and it will come through in your words and your actions. And it all starts with who you hang around with the most and who you choose to hang around with and what you choose to project with your words and your actions.
Yeah, that's really cool. I've never spent a lot of time thinking about my teacher brand, but it's interesting that we do have a brand, absolutely, and that can evolve and change with time as we
Mm-hmm.
focus on different things, and as you mentioned, as we hang out with different kinds of people. And so that's a really cool thing to think about.
And I should say too, brands are different than judgments, okay? Like, and we can't help but make judgments about people when we first meet them, you know, first
Mm-hmm.
impressions, right? Everybody has a bad day. Everybody is going to have to vent sometimes, okay? But when you vent, are you always venting? Is it something that people can predict about your behavior? Because if they can predict what you're going to say before you say it, or they can predict what you're going to do before you do it, that's your brand.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can then say, you know, that you can think about if you had a bad day and you are venting, people might say, wow, you know, this is just not like you. Then you know that is not part of who you are. I mean, we all know that teacher that has to ask the last question before everybody leaves the room, right? And I mean, you're laughing, right? You all know who's going to have the last word. That's part of their brand. You just know who's going to do that. But you also know the teacher that is like a duck. They just like let everything roll off their back. They're chill. You know, they address things that they're frustrated or concerned about, but then they do what they got to do to get it done. And that is part of their brand. So, I mean, it's so easy once you are, again, you're able to name that, able to identify the people that you want to be associated with.
Yeah. So this is a great place to set up what we can do about teacher burnout. Obviously, a good starting place is to take the quiz. It's been a while since I took your quiz. I might have to go back to the website and get through that again. But then we should put in a shameless plug here now for the podcast, because you're bringing on guests who are talking about burnout and things like that. If people turn into your podcast, tell us a little bit about what it is and what they're going to hear if they subscribe.
Yeah. So the Burn In Teacher podcast is action, inspiration, and support for teachers dealing with burnout. So it's one part burnout and all the other parts, action, inspiration, and support. So I interview teachers. I allow them to come on anonymously if they want to. A lot of them have chosen not to, though, and they share their stories of burnout and what they did to change and to switch to being burned in. But I also share strategies based on challenges that I see my people have when they join the Facebook group or whenever they do take the quiz. You know, I allow them to share what is challenging them the most. And then I do the research. I share, you know, what I know and what I have experienced myself, and give people, I mean, it is truly actionable steps you can take. This is not a podcast that is just a story and then it's over. This is all about that action and that inspiration and the support that I always think about me crying in my car on the way to work. I always think about that person when I have a bad day, when I don't want to do the work, because work is work, right? You have days where you just don't want to do it. But every time I am challenged with, oh, I just don't feel like doing it today, I think about my breakdown I had in front of my very best friends, my teacher besties. I think about the phone call that my husband got from one of my teacher friends who said, we are really worried about Amber. She's not herself. She's crying every day. And I'll never forget, it's hard. I get emotional because no one should accept that as their reality. Nobody. We should be empowered to believe that we can take control, not only take control of our burnout, but thrive through it. And that is the teacher that I always come back to whenever I'm telling the story and whenever I'm looking for guests to come on and whenever I'm sharing these strategies and going back to my story is I truly do not want any teacher who's going to work with our children. I think of my children. Do I want my children's teachers to be sad and miserable and not feel like they have a way to figure this out? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So that's what the podcast is all about in a nutshell. And I hope, Tyler, as a listener, that you have felt that come through.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that it's actionable and that you bring in people, both people who are struggling with burnout, but then also experts that know how to deal with burnout. It's good to see both sides of that. Well, Amber, thank you so much for what you've been able to share with us today. Obviously, if people want to connect with you, going to Burned In Teacher is a good place to go. Is there any other place where they can find you online if they want to connect?
Oh, yeah. Any social media outlet at Burned In Teacher. You can even email me. Email me at support@burnedinteacher.com if you want to connect. And then you can take the quiz by simply going to burnedinteacher.com or burnedinteacher.com/burnout quiz. And it's super quick too. I know that time is so important. So it's 3 minutes or less. It's only 6 questions. And you're going to get a lot of actionable steps just by taking that quiz and getting your result.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for all you're doing to serve teachers and to help them with teacher burnout. This is obviously something that we're dealing with more than ever right now with this pandemic. So really appreciate what you're doing, and we'll link to all those things in the show notes. Thanks for your time,
And
Harper.
thank you, Tyler, for doing this as well. You're doing such a great thing for our educators and students as well.
Thank you.